Hello, this is Michael Wickerson at Wickerson Studios, and I'm pulling out some scripts and geometries that I've enjoyed playing around with and making. It's definitely inspired by how I build and how I build sculptures and structures and cast metal and all these other things over the last 3 decades. Let's jump in here and I'll show you how I clean up a script after I create it. I don't think it's about learning how to copy a script. I think it's more just seeing problem solving and seeing how people interface with things. I've baked this final geometry here into Rhino, and I have it here in my view that I can take to rendering or I can consider manufacturing. I do think the 3D modeling doesn't have to go too much farther for the sculpture into lighting and camera angles and rendering and animations, but if you're interested in simulations and physics and taking this farther in the programs like Houdini, please go right ahead. The potential for learning how to not only model in a program as one single iteration and using Grasshopper as a recorded history tool is a great object, great item for you. And you see I haven't grouped these as I bake them, so I have to select them all. I'm just going to go to visibility and get them off for a minute and have my image there to look at. Parametrically, what I have created, the ghosted image of what potentially may be. All right, so let's jump into our Grasshopper script at the end. It's more than 12 nodes. You're going to find I'm dealing with a couple of dozen in these scripts. But let's go right in, zoom in, and see what we have. We have a moved form that is inspired by a array, a polar array of objects, and it's moved in the Z direction. And I can follow back. At this point, I have a parameter. I'm going to look here and I'm going to say, what is inspiring that? Well, it's a multiplier. So I can slide that multiplier all the way over here. And I can say, well, that, sorry, I just changed that. I think I changed, I think I clicked out of my object for a second. Not sure why that jumped down. I might have left my, no, I got my rendered view on there. I'm not sure what just happened. But I have a parameter that I can actually play with. It looks like it set it back to 0. So I had it actually high. And that's what happens. So that's my first kind of parameter that I can bring out. And while I clean up script, I kind of take that, put it over here and say, deal with that later. So there we go. We've got a pretty simple polar array of an object geometry, and we've moved it there. I think it's easier for some reason for me to think backwards. I have a group list of items. I have a merged item list that actually is the target of bringing this geometry, which is a very simple geometry. It is a rectangle inspired by, as I click this, you'll see I've made a rectangle. There it is, down near the bottom. And I'll use my shift to slide it up. You'll see it's a very tiny rectangle, but it builds a box, and I have a little bit of control over the width and diameter of that box. And I actually have that parameter, which I'd like to take here and make it become important. And I'd also like to follow this other one as you follow my brain down here into this multiplication tool, I believe, or division. I haven't checked it out yet. That is a dividing tool that takes two other information from a multiplication. I'm going to leave it over here and then follows that line here. And I believe it was a single, there was two informations coming out of that one and that one. So as I come down here and follow these two, I definitely have this parameter influencing it. So I'm going to bring it back here. And I have this one. I'm going to leave this back here because I don't want to get my nodes out of order. Great technique. You see that there are now two more parameters that inspire and motivate that geometry. That said, we can go back to looking at the whole form or no form. I only have only the final form on selected. And for some reason, I've lost my geometry. There's another parameter here. What did I do to my maths that fudged that? I'm not sure. Probably just have to go back to standard and then zoom extends all and find my object. Yeah, because I zoomed down to that little rectangle. So that's a parameter. It looks like I missed a little parameter here for the count of the rotation of the polar array. So I can change that, play with that as well, but that's another parameter that I'm going to want to drag all the way over here. And this is a little confusing, but if you have a system that works for you and you find the system can work for you, we've got this back to the final object. Let me take it off so we can see it. But what I like is when you put this on, you have to click and it allows you to see the other geometries that are not in preview. It's an excellent tool for Rhino 6 that you can actually have everything not on preview. You select this and then you click up here and you can put preview on and preview off, but you can leave it off. And as long as you click this, draw only preview geometry, even if they're not on preview, you can click over and see them. Great little technique, and I think it's a hint, a little tool. So I've got my X and Y size up here, and since I've already moved that node in, obviously I've already moved that. I'm getting ahead. I'm getting jumbled in my own logic. I have a geometry here that looks like I didn't use any of it. I built that geometry, so in cleaning up this code, I'm probably going to leave my original, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to save document as, and I'm going to say version 3. And that way I keep my original always. I have my picture over here. Beautiful self. I have another file, so I realized this geometry is not needed. And anything that was connected to that, like this one, get rid of that one now. I'm not using it now. I'm pulling in these move geometries. I actually have another plane that I've not used or anything, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to take my called list of points that have been moved, and that has been from a called list from a move. You'll find that I did that twice, and it's not in need of recursion. I wouldn't have to build a function and do it again because I really only did that once and that called list once. And it looked like I didn't take a called list of this one. And I know I simplified this because I was trying to get somebody interested in the script, and it was getting a little too jumbled. As for a gene pool, I think those are great for pulling in a number of number sliders and having good control. So I treat those exactly like a number slider. At this point, I'm starting to get a little separate, so I may pull them all together. There's a nice tool here of grabbing, and well, we'll do that in a minute. But basically, a gene pool allows me to grab a bunch of number sliders and keep them in control. There's a dividing tool. Once again, I'm not going to pull it ahead of my node. I'm going to pull it back as a left to right script. I'm going to take a look at here at this geometry, come back as far as I want here. As long as my script works, I'm not so worried about these spaghetti of worms of data and streams of data that are trees of data that are multiple object and lists. Obviously, that X factor has no parameter going to it, but it definitely is moving in a negative direction, that axis. And I'm just going to keep cleaning up. I'm going to take that other move tool here, try and keep my lines not looking like they're coming from another tool. Like if I move it up there, it might look like it's coming from the y-axis. I don't want that. I still want to be able to read my script a bit. It's mainly for just enough that I understand it. I'm not so concerned to everybody else understanding it. People with a little bit of skill in Grasshopper seem to be having no problems running through my script. There's a pi function there, which I love to deal in radians instead of degrees. If you don't like that, leave out the pi and deal in degrees. But I think dealing from 0 to 2.0 is great if you're actually thinking radians. And I pulled that parameter back. I have my, look at the influence of this populate 3D. I sometimes refer to them as clusters, and I shouldn't, so I apologize for that if I confuse people with that. Once again, there's a y-axis here that's influencing not just this plane, but also the rotation of that plane. And then I have a rotate tool coming off of another geometry, which motion is in the x-axis, and I have another parameter that I can slide in here. And you can go in here and name each one of these by right-clicking and give them specifics of where they came from. If I really like my scripting code and want to use it a lot, I can cluster the whole tool, but I'm not going to do that. Two domains inspire this rectangle. My Bifocals tools allows me to see the names of these things while they're in icon form. I do that regularly because I think memorizing icons is key. I can pull this object all the way back to here, but since it's a math, I'm going to pull it down here and try not to confuse myself. Once again, in a z direction, I'm going to take the A as a multiplier, and I have another multiplication tool coming off of that as well. And then that only other number slider was this one, which was 8, and I'll have to check what that ran to. The counts on that one and the counts and a multiplier I decided to bring in to link that geometry to it. Those are techniques that you're going to find in other programs. You got to wrap your head around. What I can do now is grab all my scripts. I can move them all in line, and I can space them equally, and I can pull those in about here away from my bifocal tool. And I think what you've got now is if you grab the entire script like that, and you pull it back to this corner so it fits in there, whenever you go to full screen, you kind of get the basic size of what you can pull this script into. I could change its format so maybe the names come up, but when I'm just doing screenshots for people online, I'm not interested in giving them my whole script, and they're not going to make sense of all those wires. But in the end, you've got your final object. You know which one is to bake. Nice little tool now is to play with the Scribble tool, which is double-click, and I think it's called Scribble. Scribble. Pop it in there. You can link this if you want. Double-click on it and say things like exactly what you want people to do with it. Bake me, because you don't need them in your code. You can group that into a color. I like baby blue, but it defaults to that purple. Maybe you should change it to baby blue, but maybe I like it so much. I'm also going to take this one. I'm going to group. Actually, I'm not going to group it yet. I'm going to double-click. I'm going to use the Scribble tool again, and I'm going to say I pull the little shining, come play with me. Come play with me. Come play with us forever and ever. Anyway, there you go. Grab all those scripts, put them into a group, and like I said, you can right click on it, change the color to something so beautifully, the color that makes you feel good, and there you go. You got a pretty simple script. You can change. You could just save that as that version of document you had, and people can come to it, go here, not only play with it first, play with all these number sliders. They don't have to see your whole script. It doesn't matter that they need it, but they can play with those sliders and change whatever they have. And I always think viewing in all 4 views while you do that is kind of nice. There's a nice tool to send these to remote control, but I think this is fine for the size of the script. So many awesome plugins to use, but keeping it basic. And then when I pull my into full view, I can kind of take a look, move these ones around. And once I decide what scale or size I want, I'm not sure what's going to happen here when I change it. Yeah, I can change that geometry. Probably change my angle. I want something that's working as a radian tool. I thought I had it here. This one will probably do some, play with a little bit of those. You got to tell because numbers that are floats and sit between 0 and 2 are probably dealing with pi in radians. I'm not sure what this one will do. Oh, it's just the diameter of those sticks. And I think a lot of this is, you don't know what stock you have available to you. You don't know, whatever materials fall into your lap, what kind of trees on your land you're cutting down. That all has to come alongside this planning. And I really want the sculptor and artist to move to the front end of design and laying things out and not finding themselves solely tied to, after the designers get a hold of it, the architects get a hold, the engineers engineer it, and then you become this fabricator. You become this soon-to-be automated tool. So I think those are things to consider. Bring yourself on conceptually where you are at the beginning. I'm going to take the script. I'm going to grab this little bit at the end, do a little quick bake. I could group them when I do the bake. I think I just did it. Yeah, I did. And for some reason, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to grab my object. I'm just going to delete that one. Now when I go to bake on here, I'm going to want to have a choice to group. Yes, I want to group, and I could change the color to a different layer when I bring it in the Rhino. Disappear out of there. Click this, and you can just see your model. And you see all these little versions in artistic and pen and ink. We're getting close to 12 minutes. Actually, we're over 12 minutes. Technical drawing, rendered drawing. You can go much farther in Rhino. And I'm not going to give tutorials on that, but you can go much deeper in the Rhino to play with the rendering tools and play with the material tools and get these looking pretty awesome. And play with the default Rhino renderer without getting too much into that. Like I said, I'm here for the sculptor and the one that wants to fabricate and think of how things go together. So there you go. There's your script. There's your final 12.5 minutes. And I'm going to send that to video. Thanks very much for watching.